She always saw him rushing out the building like clockwork, never late, never lingering. Until one rainy Tuesday, curiosity overpowered her pride. So the CEO followed her delivery guy through back streets, under flickering street lamps, and found him reading stories to a room full of shivering kids in a homeless shelter, with nothing but warmth in his eyes and worn-out books in his hands. Before we dive in, drop a comment with where you're watching from, and don't forget to hit subscribe for more videos like this. Let's begin. Madeline Royce had a habit of noticing things no one else did. Not because she had time, but because she made time. And for the past month, her morning latte had been arriving 5 minutes before the scheduled hour, always hot, never wrong, and with a hand-scribbled note like, "You look tired yesterday. Try caramel today." She never responded. CEOs didn't write thank you notes. They conquered, directed, delivered. But this morning, it wasn't the note that caught her attention. It was him. He wasn't wearing the usual scooter rider attire. He wore pressed jeans, a gray Henley tucked into a weather-beaten coat, and an old Army-issue backpack that had clearly seen more than coffee runs. He had a scar near his jawline. Not fresh, deep, from something brutal, something earned. And he ran. Every day. The same direction. Same intensity. Not just to beat traffic, but like he was on a mission. By 8:05 a.m., he was gone. Today, Madeline didn't go back upstairs. Today, she followed. It was surreal. The Billionaire tech tower turned to old alleyways and cracked sidewalks. From sleek glass doors to rusted fences and graffiti-tagged walls. She trailed him for 8 blocks. He never looked back. He didn't slow. And then, he stopped. A faded door. A rusted sign barely hanging. Hope Haven Shelter. He stepped inside. Madeline hesitated. Her Louboutin heels weren't made for this floor. Her Burberry coat stood out like a sore thumb. But her heart told her, go in. So she did. What she saw made her chest tighten. A half-dozen kids huddled together on threadbare mats. A cracked TV humming static in the background. And him, kneeling on the floor, animatedly reading The Velveteen Rabbit like it was Broadway. Every page a performance, every voice a character. They giggled, clapped. One little girl hugged his leg and called him Uncle Nate. Madeline forgot she was breathing. He didn't notice her until the story ended. When he turned and saw her, standing frozen by the door like a ghost in high heels, he blinked once. Sorry, this part for register volunteers only, he said, voice steady but kind. I'm not here to report you, she said, clearing her throat. You deliver my coffee. He raised an eyebrow. Right. Miss Royce. Didn't expect you here. Neither did she. She stepped closer, her tone softer. You do this every day. Every day I can. Why? Nate looked around the room. At the kids. At the cracked ceiling. At the peeling paint. Because I used to be one of them. Madeline didn't know what to say. She had seen mergers collapse. She negotiated with Saudi princes, fired board members without blinking. But this man's quiet confession, it knocked the air from her lungs. He picked up a paper cup, sipped lukewarm coffee, and looked at the kids still clinging to his sleeves. One of the boys, he nodded at a little kid in an oversized hoodie, reminds me of my brother. We slept under that same heater 10 years ago. Same smell. Same fear. Madeline's eyes stung. She hated that. Vulnerability made her feel weak. He noticed. He didn't comment. Nate grabbed a coat from a hook. You probably don't want to be seen here. It doesn't look good on press releases. I don't do things for PR, she replied. He turned, his smile sharp. Everyone does. No, she said, holding his gaze. Not everyone. Not you. That stopped him. Back outside, the city was alive. Horns blaring. Smog swallowing light. She followed him again, this time with permission. They didn't speak until they reached a food truck. He ordered 2 tacos, paid in quarters, handed her one without asking. You don't have to stay. I want to, she said quietly. He studied her. You're not used to silence, are you? No, I'm not used to not being in control. Here's the truth, he said, wiping his hands on a napkin. Those kids, they listen to me because I was them. I don't wear a title. I don't promise them scholarships or pipelines. I show up. That's all they want. And what do you want? Nate shrugged. Peace. Some days I get close. They sat under a broken streetlight, watching night fall. Madeline had $1 billion home on the riverfront. She had a Maserati parked 10 minutes away. But for some reason, this street corner, beside a man who delivered her coffee, felt more like home. I keep trying to fix people, she admitted, voice barely above the hum of traffic. My investors, my staff, my father's ghost, and myself. But I never just show up. Nate didn't say anything. He just nodded. And that silence healed something she hadn't named. The next morning, her coffee arrived again. Timely. But this time, there was no note. Instead, there was a kid's drawing folded around the cup. A little girl had sketched her, stick figure CEO, standing beside a man holding books. Underneath, it read, "Thank you for coming back." Later that day, her assistant stormed into her office. "There's a leak in the press. They saw you at a homeless shelter. Should I handle it?" Madeline looked up. "No," she said. "I'll hold a press conference." The assistant blinked. "Ma'am, I'm done pretending I don't see what matters." By noon the next day, every chair in the Royce Tech media room was full. Reporters, PR vultures, shareholders, even some of her own board members who hadn't shown their faces in 6 months were suddenly front row, pretending to be curious. The screen behind Madeline read only one phrase. "We've been looking in the wrong direction." The murmurs died the moment she stepped up to the podium. No flash, no dramatic entrance. Just a black blazer, no jewelry, no smile. Her hair was tied back, sharp clean, but her eyes, they looked softer. "I want to speak plainly today," she began, her voice steady, slow. "I've spent a decade building walls. Around my company, around my name, around my image." The photographers clicked. The live stream chat blew up. She continued. "Last week, I followed someone. A delivery man. He wasn't late. He wasn't suspicious. He wasn't doing anything wrong. But I followed him because I couldn't understand why someone would sprint away after every shift like the world was on fire." She paused. "I found him reading bedtime stories to kids who live in a shelter. Some of them don't eat more than once a day. Some of them don't speak because no one's listened to them in months. But this man, Nate, he listens." Someone in the back dropped their pen. "I used to think leadership was about creating products, moving numbers, controlling perception. But I've been wrong. Leadership is about showing up when no one's watching, about caring when there's nothing to gain, about listening." A reporter raised his hand, cautiously. "Miss Royce, are you saying this delivery man works for your company?" "He doesn't. He works for me, for the city, for those kids. And starting today, I'll work for him." Another voice. "What does that mean exactly?" She looked at the cameras. "It means Royce Tech is launching a new shelter initiative. Not a marketing ploy, not a tax write-off, a real investment in real people, starting with Hope Haven." The next 24 hours were chaos. Her phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Half the internet called her a saint. The other half said it was a publicity stunt. Her investors were confused, irritated, then curious. A national morning show offered her an interview slot. She declined. Instead, she returned to the shelter. No cameras, no speech, just her, with sleeves rolled up, and a tray of sandwiches made by her private chef. She found Nate repairing a leaky faucet in the back room. "You really did it?" he asked, surprised. "I did. And they call me insane." He smiled. "That sounds about right." Then he added, "You didn't have to come back." "I know, but this time I wanted to." That evening, she helped a girl named Lila learn to read. The child had stuttered at first, then beamed when she pronounced the word butterfly right on her own. Madeline clapped like it was Carnegie Hall. Nate watched from the door. Quiet, proud, maybe even protective. Later, outside the building under the broken lamplight again, Nate lit a small candle for a silent vigil. "Every Friday," he explained, "for the ones that didn't make it." Madeline looked at the tiny flame. "How do you keep doing this?" He looked at her, not blinking. "Because I wish someone had done it for me." She swallowed, then whispered, "Maybe we both still need saving." He didn't laugh. He just nodded. "Maybe." It rained again the next night. Not the kind that gently whispered on rooftops, but the kind that made city gutters overflow and streetlights flicker like dying fireflies. Most people stayed in, but Madeline Royce, she wasn't most people anymore. Her Bentley sat idle in a private garage. She took the subway. No heels this time. She wore sneakers and a hoodie. No makeup, no press following. Just her heart guiding her to that faded blue door again. Inside the shelter, kids were curled up in their nests of patch blankets. The warmth of the room came not from the struggling radiator, but from the man sitting crisscrossed on the stained rug, book in hand, voice dancing like a lullaby. Tonight's story? The Giving Tree. And as Nate read the final lines, his voice caught. Madeline saw it. The kids didn't. They were half asleep, trusting, peaceful. But she saw the way his shoulders dropped, the grief behind that pause. She waited until he tucked the book into his backpack before speaking. You okay? He didn't fake a smile this time. He just looked up, eyes glassy, and said, "It was my mom's favorite story." Madeline sat beside him on the floor. She passed 4 years ago. Liver failure. Never stopped drinking. Even when we had nothing, she found a bottle. I'm sorry. She wasn't perfect. But when we were kids, she used to read that story to us every Friday night. Said it was the only tree that ever gave back. She believed in trees more than people. He exhaled. You're the first person I've told that to in a long time. They sat in silence. A silence that didn't feel empty this time, but necessary. Healing. The shelter lights dimmed. A volunteer locked the door behind them as they stepped out into the rain. Neither had an umbrella. Madeline tilted her head back, letting the cold drops hit her skin. Feels real. Nate glanced at her. You're not used to that, are you? Things feeling real. No, she admitted. I've spent most of my life in a glass tower. Everyone tells me what they think I want to hear, but no one ever sees me. He stepped closer, the streetlight casting golden halos around the water dripping from his lashes. I see you, he said. The next day, Madeline called an emergency board meeting. They weren't happy. You gave away $2 million in one day, one snarled. To a shelter? It's not giving away, she replied. It's investing where it matters. You're ruining our quarterly margin. Then maybe we've been measuring the wrong margins, she said coldly. One board member leaned forward. You've changed, Madeline. Since when do you care about street kids more than shareholders? Since I stopped pretending the shareholders were people. Dead silence. She stood up. I'm not asking for permission. I'm telling you the new direction. If you want out, walk now. I'll buy you out myself. No one moved. Power returned to her bones. But this time, it felt different. Not cold. Not brutal. Rooted. Real. That evening, she found Nate again. He was patching a hole in the shelter's back roof with donated plywood. She climbed the ladder beside him without a word, grabbed the drill from his hand, and helped finish the job. You ever handled power tools before? He asked with a smirk. I built my first app with 0 code and 4 cups of gas station coffee. I think I'll survive this. He laughed. Fair. They sat on the roof afterward, legs swinging over the edge, watching distant traffic blur into light streaks. You really meant what you said in that meeting? He asked. Every word. He nodded slowly, then said something that caught her breath. You're not just changing your company. You're changing their future. She didn't sleep that night. Instead, she opened her laptop and began drafting a proposal titled, The Royce Project, Tech for the Homeless. No fluff. No fancy taglines. Just impact. She offered free coding classes to shelter teens, tablets for virtual learning, grants for GED programs, emergency phones with prepaid plans. And she called Nate at 3 a.m. He answered groggily. This better be an emergency. It is, she whispered. I need your help launching something. Something big. He sat up. I'm listening. The next 3 weeks were chaos. She pulled favors, used every contact in her Rolodex. The shelter turned into a tech hub. Volunteers tripled. Donations poured in. And Nate? He became the face of the movement. But he didn't change. He still showed up at 6 a.m. Still read stories. Still repaired broken windows with duct tape. But now, he did it with the world watching. And Madeline? She was watching too. Not as a CEO. As someone whose walls had finally crumbled. One night, as they walked out of the shelter under the stars, Nate turned to her. You know, he said, I used to think people like you didn't care about people like me. And now, he reached out and took her hand gently. Now I know you just needed a reason to remember who you are. Madeline smiled, her heart pounding. I think you were my reason. 3 months later, New York was wrapped in winter. The kind that made sidewalks crackle beneath your boots, where the air was so cold it hurt your teeth. But inside Hope Haven, it was warm, radiator humming, Christmas lights strung loosely across the cracked ceiling beams, and laughter floating like music from room to room. Madeline stepped inside with 2 boxes in her arms. Lila, the little girl who once couldn't read the word butterfly, ran up and hugged her knees. "You came back. I told you I would," Madeline whispered, kneeling to her level. "You always say that, but you really mean it." That made Madeline pause. She'd built billion-dollar empires. But that one sentence held more weight than all the applause she'd ever received in her life. Nate was in the back room again, fixing a broken heater with a volunteer. His face lit up when he saw her. "You're late," he teased. "I had to fight off 3 reporters outside the building. Hope Haven's famous now." He groaned. "That was never the goal." "But it's the effect," she replied, setting the boxes down. "Also, these are for the kids." He opened the first box. Coding kits. Pre-built modules. Second box. Books. Dozens of them. Carefully picked. "You remembered their wish list," he murmured, running his hand over the covers. "These are the exact titles they circled on that bulletin board." Madeline nodded. "I memorized it." He looked at her again, and this time, there was something unspoken between them. A closeness built not on physical touch or whispered romance, but on hours of paint-stained fingers, hard conversations, and the kind of kindness that needed no spotlight. That night, a snowstorm rolled in. The shelter filled quickly. More people than beds, more hunger than food. Nate was in a frenzy, handing out blankets, reheating soup, calling in volunteers. Madeline didn't leave. She rolled up her sleeves and served soup. She patched a boy's ripped coat with duct tape and laughed when the patch looked like a lopsided heart. She told bedtime stories, and when a mother sobbed quietly in the hallway, she wrapped her arms around her and let her cry into her shoulder. And somewhere in the early hours of the morning, as snow blanketed the city and everything went still, Madeline sat beside Nate on the floor of the main room, surrounded by soft breathing and whispered dreams. "I used to think love was supposed to be this big, dramatic thing," she whispered. "And now," she leaned her head against his shoulder, "now I think it's just showing up. Every day. For the people who need you." Weeks passed. Winter began to thaw. But life wasn't done testing them. One afternoon, Madeline was called to testify at a congressional tech hearing in D.C. A whistleblower from a partnering firm had leaked information. Royce Tech's name was on half the emails. The board panicked. Shareholders threatened lawsuits. The headlines were brutal. CEO too busy at a shelter to notice billion-dollar breach. Royce Tech empire cracking at the seams. Is Madeline Royce the philanthropy queen or a corporate failure? She sat in a sterile hotel room the night before her hearing, staring at a blank screen. Her phone rang. It was Nate. "Are you okay?" he asked. "No. Want me to come?" "More than anything," she said, voice breaking. She didn't need a lawyer. She needed him. He arrived the next morning, not in a suit, in a thrift store jacket and worn jeans. But when she stepped out of the courtroom and saw him leaning against a pillar with coffee in hand, she ran. She didn't care who was watching. She threw her arms around him like her whole life depended on it. And he whispered, "You already won, Maddie. They just don't know it yet." In the hearing, she didn't deflect. She stood tall and took responsibility for not catching the breach earlier, but also shared how she had restructured her team, increased oversight, and most importantly, what she'd learned about leadership since launching the Shelter Initiative. She didn't cry. She didn't fold. She told the truth, and the nation listened. By nightfall, the hearing was trending, but not for the scandal, for her integrity. A viral clip played on every news station. "I'd rather be known as the CEO who fought for the forgotten than one who protected her title while others froze outside." Weeks later, she stood before a packed crowd at the launch of the first-ever Royce Shelter Hub, a tech-integrated shelter model that blended housing, education, therapy, and employment into one streamlined structure. She didn't take the stage alone. Nate stood beside her, and when the mayor offered her a plaque for her service, she turned, took Nate's hand, and said into the mic, "This man saved more lives with bedtime stories than I ever did with algorithms. This is his award." The crowd went silent, then erupted in applause. Later that night, Nate handed her a small envelope. No logo, no gold trim, just her name in his handwriting. She opened it slowly. Inside was a note. Asterisk. "You said once you wanted someone to see you. I see you. Not the CEO. Not the headlines. You. The woman who held a crying girl's hand. Who read every wish list. Who fought like hell when it got hard. If you ever stop showing up, I'll be the one knocking on your door. Asterisk. Madeline blinked fast, pressing the card to her chest. I don't think I'm going anywhere, she whispered. Nate smiled. Then neither am I. That spring, the city unveiled a mural on the side of the original Hope Haven shelter. It showed children holding books, surrounded by trees and digital stars. In the center, a woman with no crown, but her hands extended, open. And beside her, a man kneeling, reading to a child, smiling like he'd never stopped. At the bottom, it read, Real power is kindness repeated.